So finally, this is the rehearsal of scene 11, 13 and 15, because I'm not in scene 12 and scene 14. I'm not going to talk about those really, because this is about my rehearsal period and things I'd learned with my new motivations of characters and more understanding and direction on that part. So I'm going to start talking about scene 11. Scene 11, I play two characters. This was something in different casts. This was something that was different in terms of learning lines. At first, when looking at the characters, I look at them separately. I hadn't really thought about how this would put into play, but it actually meant that it was quite a bit difficult because of the cues and everything, and because the cues were on my own lines. So some things that we were looking at, I'll first talk about Lola. Lola is the nurse. I already knew that she wasn't that much of an important character, but I think this is the point in the play where Anna is starting to go a bit crazy, and I've talked about the scenes and the feelings towards the scene anyway beforehand, but I've learnt that Lola is a lot more of a caring character than I thought at first. I thought she'd be caring, I thought she'd be extremely kind, like a surrogate mother, but I think she needs to be more so. I think she needs to be more reassuring, and I think I need to physically show this. There needs to be more physical intimacy in the fact, like mother-daughter, not in a relationship way, but more physical reassurance that Lola gives Anna, and I think I need to do this more. When rehearsing, we looked at this more, and we figured out a point where we both stand up and I give Anna a hug and sort of hold her and stroke her shoulder, and then another time where I sit down and then she puts her head on my lap. This was something that we developed later on, and I think it shows Anna's vulnerability. I think it was good in the fact that it shows how she feels connected to this woman, even though this woman has nothing to do with her really. It's just how she's never had this connection, and this is her surrogate mother in a way. It's all about the subtle interactions in this scene between Lola and Anna, and the like holding her close and looking after her. It's all this physical stuff that we hadn't really explored that we're now exploring in this rehearsal process, and how that links with the lines. I also have to sing in this scene. The singing is all to do with how she helped Bonnie sleep, and it's sort of supposed to be a calming thing. It's supposed to be her trying to reassure Anna, saying that she can sing too. The actual song itself I find quite creepy, but I think it's a good idea because this is Anna starting to go slightly mad, and I think it's good because I feel like the song itself shows that. It's Mockingbird, and it's slow, and at the other scenes they're talking about not wanting to have ECT, and there's a lot of synchronized lines in there. We've been working on that, and that's been working really well. It's been getting really well timed, and I think it works. It's really effective when we can get the two lines together, and we can get the synchronicity and in unison. I think it makes it really effective, and I think it makes their situations the same. I think it foreshadows the ending as well. There is another part of this scene where I also play Esther in the Bonnie and Esther scene, and a one night stand. This scene isn't very long, it's towards the end of the other scene, so towards the end of this scene altogether, when Bonnie comes in and then Esther comes in a bit later on. Bonnie comes in, she gets changed, she sits on the toilet, and we've got all of that kind of figured out, of where the position will be. The room is going to be small, we're going to plan the size of it to be small so that it shows a confined space, and also might help me become more predatorial towards Bonnie, because initially I thought it was like a harmless one night stand, but as I talked about, it's not. It's more like a predatory sexual predator that Esther is. This is a big contrast from the scene 10. So when looking at it again, I found that it's sort of this act of rebellion. Bonnie's character is starting to change, or the cracks are starting to show through what she was trying to show and what she was hiding or how she was feeling. I think this is her act of rebellion, but she instantly regrets. And so this is something that's totally out of her character, and I think it's a good scene to follow the last scene where she's shouting and letting it all out. So when, in terms of learning about new developments about Esther's character, Esther isn't really a main character either, but she was hard to play. She's quite a dominant character, she's quite a predatory character, she's someone who's trying to coerce Bonnie to come back into bed with her, and not to leave, and she almost isn't letting Bonnie leave, and I'm finding that quite hard to play. In my rehearsal process, I've been trying to be more physical. Chip said to be more physical, to touch her hand more, but for Bonnie not to respond, and I'm finding that hard, but I think I need to work on it more and to get some sort of as if I was trying to get some sort of response from Bonnie. Esther was trying to get some response from Bonnie, but it's not working. But she's still trying, and she says things like, I didn't mean to freak you out, but this whole predatory thing that she's trying to show off, the whole physicalization of it is something that we've added in a lot of new direction for. So preventing her from leaving in the doorway, a lot of the action happens in the doorway, finding her shoe, which is sort of, I feel, a way of allowing her to leave, but at the same time she doesn't, and she said she'd like to see her again, and it's this thing that Bonnie doesn't really want to get into. And even the character herself is quite predatory, Esther, but especially to someone like Bonnie, who's almost fragile and not really into that sort of, is emotionless but not into that sort of relationship, has got herself into, and is probably more intimidated by. So I feel like that's the new developments in scene 11. Scene 13 is not a lot of content again for my characters or motivation for my characters. My character is just a nurse. There's another nurse on stage who's played by the opposite Carol in the other cast, so that's Izzy for me. I don't feel that there's a lot of importance in my scene when it comes to the feelings or motivations behind it in scene 13. It's just basically giving Anna ECT. The main key thing is doing it with care. Now, we'd looked at some slight ideas behind the medical routine, but when we realised what sort of props we're going to have, this helped us to develop our routine better, and figure out exactly what we're going to do. So we've been practicing with some props that we have, with the risers to represent the bed, and thinking about how the electric shocks are going to be given, because we looked at how realistically they're given, and then how we're going to dramatise this and make it more visible to an audience. So we timed some of the lines with the other scenes to when the electric shocks were going to happen. We're using blood pressure machines and stethoscopes to measure heart rate, and computers at the back, and loads of props. There will be so many props that we're going to use in this scene. I think that's going to be hard to get on and off when we look at transitions more, because we're starting to look at that as well. But I also think it's going to be hard to use all of it and to get the timings right, and that's something that we're going to have to practice, because we've practiced the physical routine of doing it with what props we have and using other items before we have the props to as the other props. So in those regards, trying to figure out physically what we're going to do with the props we've done, and I think it's good. It shows and provides something else more physical for the audience to watch whilst the other scenes are going on. And I think when it's linked to the other scenes, it's a lot about how they represent what's going on in the other scenes. It's a physicalization of the thoughts and feelings in the other scenes. And I don't think there's a lot of development to go on in that scene, just the physical, doing the medical stuff that we've had to figure out and that we're still needing to practice. Finally, scene 15. Scene 15, I have a recording of the other cast because we have all the set put up at the moment. So with all the set in the background, I think, and I also have another recording without, so I'm going to see which one, and I'm going to look at the character development in that. Scene 15 we haven't looked at a lot, but it's basically Bonnie wanting to be sterilised, and Anna killing herself. There's been a lot of discussion about how we're going to have Anna kill herself. I think we've come to the conclusion that she does kill herself in the bath, but whether we'll have a bath or not, or whether she'll just walk off stage, I think it'll have the same effect, and I think that's up to them in the end. I think that'll be a last minute decision, but I think it'll create the same effect from the audience, and the audience will still know that she's going to kill herself because she'll be holding a knife or a razor in her hand. Regards to my characters, I play Diane, who's the doctor talking to Bonnie, who wants to get sterilised. I think it's quite important in the fact that the doctor's contrast. I feel like my doctor has to be quite emotionless, and I think it is almost like the way Bonnie was at the beginning of the play, or how we thought Bonnie was at the beginning of the play. But we see Bonnie cry in this, begging for the sterilisation, and for Diane to be like, Bonnie. And I think that at first I thought it was just a simple, not really thinking much into the characters, but I think we need to think more into the characters and more into Diane, because this is an important scene in Bonnie's timeline, because you realise that she's not going to kill herself, she's choosing another option. And it's interesting as well because she's a lesbian, and in this sense it will be a bit confusing for why she's getting sterilised, and the doctor questions that, Diane questions that, and me as Diane questions that. So I think that this is something that I'm going to have to look at more, and I have looked at more through the character development, but with Bonnie showing such high emotion, Diane is a contrast to that, and it's important to show and understand the motivations of both characters in the scene, so that you can understand why Bonnie has made that decision. And I think it's because she says she doesn't want the line to go any further, and she feels it's something genetic, it's something inherited, and she feels like something could happen, and she doesn't want any chance of that. She doesn't want any feeling of that, or responsibility of that, and any pressure of that, having a child or anything towards that. So those are the main feelings and thoughts I think about that scene, and how there wasn't any really much direction in the scene, apart from the fact that we had to contrast, we had to show a bit of awkwardness and perhaps confrontation in this scene. It's an uncomfortable scene, and it's supposed to be sad, and people are focusing mainly on that once Anna has killed herself. So it's showing that, really, and not the final scene, but still one of the last scenes, because it's only Bonnie's side that's going on anymore. And yeah.